The first years of the marriage taught Emily that nearly every uncomfortable family moment could be explained away if she was willing to accept one of three conclusions. Margaret had meant well, Rachel had been under pressure, or Emily had taken something too personally. Those explanations sounded reasonable when considered separately, and that was part of what made the pattern so difficult to recognize. No single incident seemed serious enough to justify the heaviness that followed her home. Nothing looked large enough to name as abuse. There were no public scenes, no shouted threats, no obvious declarations that she did not belong. There were only small moments in which her motives were interpreted negatively. Her reactions were judged more harshly than anyone else's, and her attempts to explain herself were treated as proof that she was defensive. The first Christmas after the wedding, she gave Margaret a hand-stitched table runner chosen to complement the dining room. Margaret thanked her warmly in front of everyone, then later told Daniel that the gift had made her feel judged, as though Emily had been suggesting that the existing linens were inadequate. Emily had spent weeks choosing it and had imagined Margaret using it during family dinners for years. By the time Daniel explained his mother's feelings, the gift itself no longer mattered. Emily was too busy examining the intention. She thought she had understood when she bought it. She apologized and promised to be more thoughtful. The next Mother's Day, determined not to make the same mistake, Emily brought flowers. Margaret later described them as impersonal. That should have told Emily something. Instead, it taught her to try harder. Scapegoating systems survive partly because the designated person believes improvement will eventually produce fairness. She assumes the problem is a skill she has not mastered, a family custom she has misunderstood, or a personality difference she can soften through greater care. She does not yet understand that the standard is being used not to guide her behavior, but to preserve her position. If the table runner is too personal and the flowers are not personal enough, there is no correct gift. There is only a conclusion waiting to be justified. By the third year, Emily no longer asked whether a criticism made sense. She asked how quickly she could repair whatever discomfort had followed it. She became skilled at apologizing without fully understanding the offense. She learned to say that she had not intended harm, that she was sorry things had been misunderstood, and that she would be more careful next time. Those apologies rarely produced closeness, but they ended the immediate tension, and immediate relief can feel like resolution when a person has been kept anxious long enough. Rachel understood the family rules differently because they had never been applied to her in the same way. When Rachel interrupted, the family described her as passionate. When she arrived late, everyone understood the demands of motherhood. When she forgot birthdays, she was overwhelmed. When she raised her voice, she had reached her limit. Rachel's behavior always arrived with context. Emily's behavior arrived as character. That difference became especially clear at Sunday dinners. Rachel could dominate a conversation, dismiss another person's opinion, and complain openly without anyone questioning her loyalty to the family. Emily could ask one careful question and find herself defending not only the question, but the kind of woman who would ask it. A discussion about Rachel's difficult coworker once became a referendum on Emily's supportiveness, simply because Emily suggested that an email might have been misunderstood. Rachel heard betrayal where Emily had offered perspective. Margaret responded as though Emily had denied Rachel comfort, and Daniel remained quiet because silence had protected him inside that family long before Emily arrived. By dessert, Emily had apologized twice. In the car afterward, Daniel told her that Rachel became defensive when she felt challenged, and that Emily could have chosen a better moment. He thought he was explaining the situation. What he was really doing was handing Emily responsibility for anticipating another adult's reaction. He did not ask Rachel to tolerate a question. He asked Emily to predict and prevent Rachel's discomfort. When Emily finally asked when she was permitted to disagree, Daniel reacted as though the question itself escalated the conflict. He told her not to turn one awkward dinner into a family conspiracy, and by the time they reached home, Emily was apologizing for upsetting him. That night, she lay awake reconstructing the conversation word by word. She searched for cruelty in her tone, disrespect in the timing, or hostility hidden inside a question she remembered asking gently. She found nothing. Yet the family's confidence had become more persuasive to her than her own memory. That was the stage at which the story about Emily began traveling beyond the people who had created it. Margaret never announced that her daughter-in-law was a bad person. She was too careful for language that direct. She described Emily through expressions of concern. She said Emily meant well but came from a different kind of family. She said Daniel had to be patient because Emily took things personally. She told relatives that everyone had learned to walk on eggshells, never mentioning that Emily was the person who entered every gathering, already preparing not to offend. Concern became the respectable language through which character assassination traveled. Rachel added examples stripped of context. Emily had declined an invitation after working late, so she did not value family. Emily had asked that people call before arriving, so she was controlling. Emily had objected when Rachel borrowed a dress and returned it stained, so she cared more about possessions than relationships. Emily had requested that Margaret stop joking about when she and Daniel would have children, so she had become hostile toward harmless family interest. Ordinary boundaries were retold as evidence. Soon, Emily entered rooms where people already believed they understood her. Cousins she barely knew greeted her with careful warmth. An aunt pulled Daniel aside at a wedding and reminded him that marriage required patience. Relatives praised him for being steady, and each compliment carried the quiet implication that he had been burdened with instability. Emily could feel the story before anyone spoke it directly. It lived in pauses, glances, and the unnatural gentleness people sometimes use when they have been warned about someone. When she asked Daniel what his mother had been saying, he told her that families talked. When she showed him a message from a cousin referring to tension in the marriage, he warned her not to become consumed by other people's opinions. She had been placed inside a story she had not written, and then criticized for trying to understand it. This was more than emotional pain. Emotional abuse was teaching Emily that acceptance depended on swallowing hurt. Psychological abuse was weakening her confidence in perception, memory, and judgment. The two worked together until she could be blamed for an event she clearly remembered, and still wonder whether everyone else knew something she did not. Family scapegoating functions by assigning one person responsibility for discomfort the system refuses to examine honestly. The scapegoat becomes the explanation for conflict, the target of correction, and the person expected to restore peace. When she objects, the objection is presented as further evidence that she is difficult. When she withdraws, the withdrawal proves she is cold. When she tries harder, the effort becomes control. The family does not merely criticize her behavior, it creates a role broad enough to reinterpret nearly anything she does. Emily began keeping notes after Ben's birthday party because reality had started feeling slippery. Rachel had asked her to arrive at the skating rink at 11 to help set up. Emily arrived early, collected the cake, arranged the tables, checked the decorations, and spoke with the manager about missing party favors. Rachel did not arrive until afternoon when some guests were already entering. Emily completed what needed to be done because a child's party was beginning and no one else was there to do it. By Monday, the family version was that Emily had taken over the celebration. For once, she did not rely on memory alone. She opened the text message showing the requested arrival time and wrote the sequence in a plain notebook. Rachel asked for help. Emily arrived. Rachel was late. Guests came. Emily handled the necessary tasks. Rachel later said Emily had made the party about herself. The facts looked almost embarrassingly simple on paper. The notebook grew because simplicity had become difficult to maintain once the family began explaining events back to her. Emily recorded the dinner where Rachel accused her of disloyalty, the comments about children, the unannounced visits, and the dress returned stained. She documented the day Margaret denied telling relatives about Emily's miscarriage even though sympathy messages arrived within hours of the private conversation. Emily was not building a prosecution. She was trying to preserve a relationship with her own mind. Daniel reacted badly when he learned about the notebook. To him, written records looked hostile because his family survived by allowing each event to dissolve into interpretation. Documentation prevented the familiar reshaping. It created edges around what had happened and made it harder for intentions to replace impact. He told Rachel about the notebook while seeking what he called perspective. Rachel later mocked it at Thanksgiving. But long before that public betrayal, the disclosure revealed something important about Daniel's loyalty. He still treated his family as the place where problems involving Emily could be evaluated. Emily was his wife, but the family remained the authority. The first time Daniel briefly understood the system was the evening Emily stayed home with the flu. Without her at dinner, the blame did not disappear. It moved. Margaret criticized Daniel for not calling enough. Rachel said he had become judgmental. Nathan accused him of acting superior because he lived across town. Robert suggested that Emily's work schedule had become more important than family. Daniel returned home carrying the same confusion Emily carried after nearly every gathering. He had explained himself, but each explanation produced another accusation. He had tried to clarify his intentions, but intention did not protect him. He had felt the family's attention narrow around him until every discomfort in the room became evidence of his failure. Emily asked what it had felt like. The question frightened him because he understood its meaning before she explained it. He accused her of using one bad evening to prove a point, although she had not mentioned the notebook, Thanksgiving, or any previous conflict. Daniel had experienced the role for only a few hours and could not tolerate Emily recognizing it. The family had needed someone to blame, and because Emily's chair was empty, the burden had settled on him. He had seen the system. He was simply not ready to admit that she had been living inside it for years. Thanksgiving arrived carrying every old expectation beneath the language of tradition. Margaret sent a family message assigning dishes, arrival times, and responsibilities. Emily was expected to bring multiple sides, rolls, a centerpiece, and help coordinate cleanup. Rachel was asked to bring one pie, only one, and, at the bottom of the message, Margaret reminded everyone to make an effort to keep the day pleasant. A sentence addressed to the group, but aimed toward the person already expected to disrupt it. Emily read the message differently than she would have a year earlier. She no longer saw a list of tasks alone. She saw the structure surrounding them. She was being given more responsibility and less grace, then warned in advance that any tension would belong to her. She told Daniel she would attend, bring one dish, and refuse responsibility for managing the entire day. When he warned her not to arrive expecting a fight, she recognized another piece of the pattern. She had not entered the house. No incident had occurred. Yet her plan to correct false accusations was already being framed as aggression. "I'm preparing not to disappear," she told him. That sentence marked the beginning of agency, although Emily did not yet know it. Agency rarely begins with a dramatic exit. It begins when a person privately decides that preserving herself matters too. The family pressure increased before Thanksgiving. Margaret's sister called Emily and urged her to give Margaret grace. A cousin sent a message about life being too short for grudges. Robert told Daniel that Margaret had been crying. No one asked Emily what had happened. No one suggested that Margaret stop discussing private concerns with relatives. The family had converted Margaret's discomfort into an emergency and Emily's distress into an attitude problem. These relatives functioned as flying monkeys, whether they understood the role or not. They carried the dominant person's message, reinforced the approved version of events, and pressured the scapegoat to return to compliance. Their involvement made the family story appear widely confirmed, even though each person had received information from the same source. Daniel agreed that his mother should not have involved outsiders, but he wanted to wait until after Thanksgiving to confront her. Waiting protected the celebration. It did not protect Emily. Rachel arrived much later carrying a bakery pie, and Margaret welcomed her without criticism. Nothing about the difference was new. Emily was new inside it. She noticed the double standard without immediately turning it into evidence against herself. She helped set the table because she chose to help. When Margaret moved the centerpiece, then reconsidered and wanted it moved again, Emily told her she was welcome to place it wherever she preferred. The boundary was tiny. Her body reacted as though it were enormous. For years, Emily had interpreted compliance as kindness. Now she was beginning to understand that kindness freely offered and compliance extracted through fear were not the same thing. The Thanksgiving meal might still have ended with another quiet apology if Rachel had not mentioned the notebook. Rachel made a joke about Emily documenting everyone, then revealed that Daniel had shared private information. The betrayal reached beyond Rachel's mockery. Daniel had taken Emily's attempt to preserve reality and handed it to the very people whose behavior made it necessary. When Emily asked why, he said he had been seeking perspective. That answer exposed the hierarchy more clearly than an argument could have. Daniel had believed his family was entitled to evaluate Emily's response to their behavior. Her private effort to understand harm had become material for the people causing it. Margaret immediately reframed the notebook as an attack. Rather than ask why Emily felt compelled to document events, she described the records as evidence of suspicion. Rachel mocked Emily's perception. Robert became quiet. Nathan avoided eye contact. Ben watched. Then the gravy spilled. Rachel's arm struck the serving arrangement, but Margaret said Emily's name before checking what had happened. The accusation followed the old path so quickly that Emily's mind began to follow it too. She was already preparing to stand, clean the table, and apologize when Ben interrupted. But Aunt Emily didn't do it. The silence that followed did not come from uncertainty. Everyone knew he was right. The discomfort came from hearing the pattern spoken aloud by someone who had not yet learned to protect it. Anne reminded them that Rachel had spilled the gravy. When Margaret said she had misspoken, he pointed out that she always seemed to misspeak about Emily. He remembered the birthday party, the missed school concert, and the reminder Margaret claimed never happened. Children are not always able to explain abuse systems, but they often recognize unfairness with startling clarity. Because they have not yet learned which person is supposed to remain unbelievable. Rachel tried to send him upstairs. Emily told him he had done nothing wrong. That was when Rachel accused Emily of undermining her as a mother, and Margaret pressed a hand to her chest as though the greatest harm of the afternoon was being confronted with what had just happened. Every familiar mechanism activated at once. Rachel shifted attention from the false blame to her parental authority. Margaret transformed accountability into injury. Robert withdrew. Nathan became quiet. Daniel watched the system defend itself. For the first time, Emily did not rush to comment. She looked at the gravy spreading across the white tablecloth and understood that the spill itself was almost irrelevant. The family had shown her the entire pattern in miniature. Someone else caused the problem. Margaret blamed Emily. A witness named the truth. The adults became angry with the witness. Then they accused Emily of creating conflict because she refused to participate in the lie. Years of confusion became one clear sequence. Emily stood beside the table and told them that when something went wrong, she was expected to fix it. When someone else caused harm, she was expected to forgive it before anyone admitted what happened. When she spoke, she was difficult, and when she remained quiet, her silence was used to prove she was cold. Margaret denied that anyone had ever called her the problem. Emily no longer allowed the denial to erase the evidence. She named the stories told to relatives, Rachel's accusations, Daniel's repeated requests that she tolerate treatment no one else was asked to tolerate, and the fact that Margaret had blamed her for a spill while her hands remained in her lap. Margaret said she had misspoken. Emily answered with the truth that had taken 6 years to form. You always misspeak in the same direction. The sentence mattered because it separated mistake from pattern. Anyone can say the wrong name once. Repeated error that consistently harms the same person is not random. It reveals where blame has been trained to go. Rachel demanded to know whether Emily expected the entire family to apologize. In the past, Emily would have wanted exactly that. She would have believed acknowledgement could finally secure her place, but recognition had changed the goal. She no longer needed a performance of acceptance from people committed to preserving the role. No, she said. I want to stop participating. She explained that she would not accept blame for actions she did not take, remain in conversations where her reality was mocked, or attend gatherings where respect applied to everyone except her. When Rachel accused her of threatening to keep Daniel away from the family, Emily refused the role of controlling wife too. Daniel could make his own choice. Then she collected her coat. In the foyer, Daniel asked what he was supposed to do. For years, that question had made Emily responsible for his conscience. She had explained what she needed, softened the consequences, and offered him ways to preserve both the marriage and the family's comfort. This time, she told him she did not know and would not decide for him. When he said his mother would claim Emily had stormed out, Emily accepted the inevitability of the false story. She did not defend herself in advance. She did not return to the dining room to manage how her departure would be interpreted. She simply left calmly. That was her boundary, not controlling the story, controlling her participation in it. Daniel remained at the table long enough to see what happened without her. Rachel accused Emily of manipulation. Margaret said she had always known Emily wanted to divide the family. Nathan suggested that Emily had made valid points, and Margaret turned toward him. Robert defended Nathan, and Margaret accused her husband of humiliation. Rachel complained that everyone had ruined Ben's holiday. Within minutes, blame began moving from one person to another. Emily's absence did not restore peace. It exposed the fact that peace had depended on having one person available to carry the conflict. When Daniel returned home, he told Emily she had been right about the way his family moved blame. She did not feel vindicated. Recognition after years of abandonment does not automatically produce relief. Sometimes it produces grief for how long the truth had been available. Emily told him she needed more than one moment of awareness. She needed him to understand what his avoidance had cost her. Every time the family harmed her and he asked her to let it go, he taught them there would be no consequence. Every time he explained their intentions before acknowledging her pain, he made her defend her right to be hurt. Every time he claimed to be caught in the middle, he ignored that Emily had been standing alone. Daniel said he had believed he was keeping peace. Emily understood the distinction clearly now. You were keeping access. He had wanted access to his family without confronting the price they charged his wife. Calling that arrangement peace had hidden who was paying for it. Daniel admitted that sharing the notebook violated her trust. He apologized and waited, perhaps expecting the familiar reassurance that he was not a bad husband and that everything could be repaired quickly. Emily did not offer immediate forgiveness. She acknowledged the apology and allowed the discomfort to remain with the person who had caused it. That was another form of reclamation. She had spent years treating everyone else's distress as an emergency. Now she was learning that another adult's discomfort could be a consequence rather than a crisis. Daniel began therapy. Emily sought her own support first. When she met Dr. Celeste Monroe, she carried the notebook in her bag and prepared to establish credibility through details. She expected to explain every contradiction so thoroughly that no reasonable person could dismiss her. Instead, Dr. Monroe asked what happened when Emily refused blame. They say I'm defensive, and when you accept it, everyone calms down. The answer revealed the function of Emily's apologies. They had not been requests for repair. They had been a regulation system for the family. Her confession restored comfort because it allowed everyone else to avoid self-examination. Dr. Monroe explained that a scapegoat's compliance can become so useful that the family calls any refusal difficult. Emily's distress did not prove she was the source of dysfunction. It might indicate that she had been carrying emotions and consequences that belonged to several people. Emily cried when she heard that, not because the concept was entirely new, but because someone named her experience without making her prove that she deserved belief. Validation did not erase the past. It returned ownership of reality. Emily and Daniel established boundaries slowly. Daniel would not share private information without permission. They would travel separately to gatherings if Emily chose to attend. Emily would leave conversations where she was mocked or blamed for another person's behavior. Daniel would no longer ask her to endure harm because confronting it felt difficult. When Daniel told Margaret that normal visits could not resume without accountability, she responded with a long email listing everything she had ever done for Emily. She described holidays hosted, gifts purchased, and invitations extended. She said one misunderstanding had been weaponized against her and accused Emily of isolating Daniel. She ended by presenting herself as a mother abandoned by a son who had chosen his wife over his family. The email addressed Margaret's pain in great detail. It did not address her behavior. That was Darvo in a family form. Margaret denied the pattern, attacked Emily's motives, and reversed the roles until she became the injured person and Emily became the aggressor. The sheer length of the response created the appearance of substance, while avoiding the original issue entirely. Rachel called Daniel and said Margaret had not slept, Robert's blood pressure had risen, and Ben felt guilty for ruining Thanksgiving. Daniel stopped her at the last claim. Ben had not ruined anything. He had told the truth. For the first time, Daniel protected the witness instead of the system. The family eventually agreed to a counseling session because Margaret believed a professional would confirm that Emily was too sensitive. In the therapist's office, the familiar pattern appeared without needing to be recreated. Margaret called the gravy accusation an accidental use of the wrong name. Rachel described Emily as suspicious. Questions about specific behavior became debates about intentions. Accountability was treated as a judgment of character. When the therapist asked whether Rachel had shared stories about Emily with relatives, Rachel explained that she had merely expressed concern. When asked whether she discussed the notebook, she redirected attention toward Daniel for mentioning it first. Daniel accepted responsibility for his disclosure, but Rachel still resisted answering the question. Then Margaret began to cry and declared that she must be a terrible mother. The emotional center of the room shifted immediately. Robert moved toward her. Rachel looked at Emily with anger. Daniel tensed. Everyone had been trained to rescue Margaret from the discomfort of accountability. Emily remained still. She did not declare Margaret a good mother. She did not apologize for causing tears. She did not abandon the original issue. When Margaret accused her of lacking compassion, Emily answered calmly, "I can have compassion for your feelings without surrendering the truth." That sentence became one of the clearest boundaries of her recovery. Compassion did not require agreement. Understanding another person's pain did not require accepting responsibility for it. A survivor could remain humane without becoming available for manipulation. Margaret left the session early. Rachel followed. Robert stayed behind long enough to tell Emily that she had not deserved all of it. It was not a full apology. He still divided the harm into a portion Emily deserved and a portion she did not. Yet the statement marked the first visible fracture in the family's shared denial. Emily did not build her healing around that fracture. She no longer waited for the family to become honest before allowing herself to become free. 6 months after Thanksgiving, she hosted a small lunch in her own home. She invited people who could share a table without assigning one person responsibility for everyone's emotions. Nathan attended with his partner. 2 of Emily's colleagues brought dessert. Daniel prepared the main dish. Ben came with Robert's permission and spent part of the afternoon constructing a card tower on the living room floor. The napkins did not match. One dish arrived late. The centerpiece was simple. No one interpreted those things as evidence of Emily's character. Daniel remained in therapy. Their marriage was not repaired by one realization or one apology. Trust returned through repeated choices. He corrected false statements when Emily was absent. He stopped carrying private information back to his family. He allowed Margaret to be disappointed without asking Emily to remove the disappointment. Emily's recovery also happened through repetition. She stopped grading herself after conversations. She declined invitations without writing paragraphs of explanation. She ended calls when accusations began. She asked for clarification rather than accepting vague criticism. She learned that confusion was not always proof that she had failed to understand. Sometimes confusion was the intended result of rules designed to keep changing. The notebook changed with her. Its early pages documented contradictions because she feared losing reality. Its later pages recorded boundaries, left when the conversation became insulting, declined without over-explaining, did not respond to an accusation disguised as concern, trusted what I saw. On the final page, Emily wrote the sentence that captured what the family had mistaken for difficulty. I was not difficult. I was difficult to control once I understood the role. She closed the notebook and placed it in a drawer. She did not throw it away. The record still mattered, but she no longer needed to consult it before believing herself. During the lunch, Ben accidentally knocked over a glass of water. The sound made him freeze. For a moment, his expression carried the fear of a child who had learned that accidents could become character judgments. Emily handed him a towel and told him it was only water. Everyone helped wipe the table. No one searched the room for someone to blame. No one turned the spill into evidence. No one required a confession to restore peace. The water was cleaned. The conversation continued. That ordinary moment showed Emily what healthy family life could feel like. Peace was not the silence created after one person accepted guilt. Peace was the safety of knowing that mistakes could remain mistakes. Feelings could belong to the people experiencing them, and love did not require a permanent villain. Some families call a woman difficult because she notices the double standard. They call her divisive because she refuses to participate in denial. They call her unforgiving because she no longer accepts apologies without changed behavior. They call her controlling because she sets limits on access to her time, body, home, or emotional labor. But repetition does not transform a label into truth. Sometimes many people agree that one woman is the problem because the agreement protects everyone else from accountability. The scapegoat is not necessarily the person creating the conflict. She may be the person carrying conflict others refuse to own. Emily's freedom did not begin when the Carter family admitted what they had done. Some of them never fully did. Her freedom began when she stopped auditioning for acceptance in a system that required her to distrust herself. She was not the difficult daughter-in-law. She had been the designated container for everyone else's discomfort. And once she put that burden down, the family had to decide whether to examine itself or find another person to carry it. Either way, Emily was no longer available for the role. Her story is fictional. The pattern is real. Dear hearts, thank you for spending this time with us in the Velvet Circle. If you haven't already, subscribe and become part of the family. See you in the next story. One final question. Did you see yourself or someone you care about in this story? If so, don't stay quiet. Tell someone and ask for help. The story is fictional. The pattern is real.
Please don't forget to like this video, share with your friends, and leave a comment below. Subscribe, join the family, and let us know where you are watching and listening from. The lessons you learned, and your thoughts on how we can continue improving to give you the very best. Thank you.